In life, you're going to be tested, not just by life's challenges, but by people who attack, who mock, and misunderstand your mission. Whether it's trolls online or critics in real life, their resistance isn't necessarily proof that you're off track. It could be a confirmation that you carry something worth protecting. Here's something to consider, though. Power without compassion becomes a weapon that can do a lot of harm to others. And compassion without boundaries becomes a weakness that can cause a lot of harm to yourself. Today, Brian and I are talking about how to handle hate without becoming hateful, and how to protect your purpose without abandoning your peace, and how to stand as a warrior rooted in the heart of God, who is firm, focused, and free. And we'll explore what we mean by God in a bit. And this is how men are actually going to elevate humanity, not be part of the downfall of humanity, not by reacting to darkness, but by becoming a light that no darkness can actually dim. And we're going to cover 5 topics briefly here, if we can move through them all in this particular episode. The first topic is God alignment versus ego reaction. We'll distinguish that. Then we'll get into a little bit of nonviolent communication and emotional mastery, a real secret to communication in a healthy way. Then we'll move into shadow projection and the mirror principle. Number 4 will be sacred boundaries with compassion. And number 5, blessing the hater, the lover's radical power. Not always easy to live by, but something that we can aspire to and we can spur one another on to. So Brian, would love for you to bring your opening here and we'll start diving into the topics. Excited to be here with you, brother.
It's so powerful. I mean, this topic everybody deals with in some form or fashion. And I just love the mission we're on, which is, how are you sourced from God? And when we say God, we're not talking about the man in the sky. We're not talking about the frame of one ideology and one religion. We're talking about a universal principle that all people have a connection to, a unique divine connection to your power and your purpose, is the most secular way of talking about God. And in this conversation, we use God because that's just a great blanketed term that says it to us. We get it. It's your power and your purpose, and it's this relationship that you have with it. So I'm excited about how to do this because I struggle with this. Like, it is a problem for me when I have a hater in my face. I want to crush his fucking face, And I say I want to be loving, and I say all these things, and I am loving until it's in my face. And I notice from the mirror principle, when hate is in front of me, I become quite hateful. And so I want to transcend that. I want to show the next level of mastery, because that's what God is calling me to do. My power, my purpose says, no, that ain't the way. And the next level is something, just to say, as a model, Jesus Christ, something more like that. That's what's there for me.
So good. So good. Clear. Yeah. So this is perfect. We're rolling right into the God alignment versus ego reaction distinction. We're going to distinguish the two. Brian started to open it up. God is a very broad term. And there are many definitions that people bring, even in different religions. People might all say they believe in a particular God or whatever. And then there's a lot of different ideas about what that God actually means. For me, God is life. And I have personally experienced, multiple religions and found a lot of value in all of them and still do to this day. I'm looking for the character of life that nurtures me forward and grows me and guides me to be a person that feels more aligned with life. Of course, I love Jesus Christ because Jesus Christ's teachings are some of the most powerful teachings on the planet that are very difficult for the human ego to accept, right? To love your enemy, to pray for those who persecute you, and do those kinds of things. But I can read that and I can say that's a wonderful thing. I actually created a video yesterday on the mystical meaning of Christ in you and what it means to have God's presence, purpose, and power in full command over your mind, emotions, and body. It's actually possible for a human being to live out of God as a source versus the human conditioning that we pick up in the world that we were born into. And we often don't distinguish that. To me, to be born again, it more practically just means you're no longer operating from the source of your human background. You're now operating out of a new alignment with a source that lives inside of you. Because think about it, you come out of your mother's womb and you're facing your dad, your mom, your family, whoever, school, this, media, that, and you're shaped and molded by all those externals. But to be born again, to me, it's not some woo-woo spiritual term and doesn't belong to just Christians alone. It means being literally reignited with life from the inside and drawing your sense of purpose that Brian's really emphasizing here, and your power from that inner substance, right? And so that to me is what the Bible is speaking about when it uses the term Christ. And we're talking about God alignment versus ego reaction. And part of what we're going to explore here is how to respond from your center, right? The center of your power, the center of your divinity, right? And not your wounds. Because the ego reaction is basically a set of compensational strategies to overcome your pain. And so Brian and I have explored this quite a bit over the years. And we love to take a look at ourselves and see where is that still happening. And it's important to have a lens constantly looking back. So we'll talk about aligning with the sovereign archetype within, this godly presence, purpose, and power, and this calm, grounded, visionary nature, and yielding to that perspective before responding to conflict out of that ego reaction. And we're going to talk about how to let God be your source of your identity, which is the born again experience that we're talking about here, and not letting praise or criticism sway you one way or the other. So we'll take a few minutes on this topic, Brian. I'm sure you've got a lot to share here. Let's go.
Well, I think it all just starts in a question, which is how do I know when it's not my ego? And for me, just enough practice so far, the practice I have is inside of like, what's the character or quality of my thoughts and my feelings and my expression, right? And so it's all sourced in fear for me. When I have fearful thoughts, which is where my hate comes from, which is where my aggression comes from, which is when I am not relaxed, right? I'm reading this book around chi, and from an acupuncturist and a Tai Chi. He teaches Tai Chi. I'm reading this book, and it's really talks about how do you be strong and relaxed? How is it that you are firm and 100% relaxed? And that's how I know when I'm connected. Is when I have enough firmness to say, no, this isn't going to happen here. Sorry. I don't know what you're doing, but I'm going to stand right in your face. And I'm relaxed enough to know that, like, I'm not so concerned or fearful of my bodily safety or my family or all the things that normally happen when I'm ready to confront something, right? But when I can confront what there is and be relaxed, that's how I know. And I'm here to practice more of that. Really, that's all there is.
That's
because
great.
I'm only as good as I'm not good at it.
I'm finding that's beautiful. You brought this up, man. So having a martial arts background, and my last major study was Kung Fu, Fu Jiao Pai, coupled with Tai Chi. And so we were alternating throughout the days of training. There was our Fu Jiao Pai is a very hard, intense, like very vicious martial art. And then Tai Chi was this soft and fluid. And it was like, energetically speaking, it was really the experience of exploring that hard, intense masculine forces in my body with Fu Jiao Pai. And then with Tai Chi, it's like completely feminine, soft, flowy, relaxed. And I remember my Sifu telling me when he would set me up to spar train with him. And, we would start with wrists connected. And I was so rigid. And he was like, relax. And I was like, what? Like I couldn't what do you mean relax? I got tensed up. and that was so natural for me. And he was like, no, relax, like soften. And he had to remind me over and over and over. And so being in a state where I'm about to have conflict, physical contact and conflict, right? I learned how to soften inside of that scenario. And when I was younger, I would fight and get real fist fights in street clubs and all that stuff. And, you know, I was tense and whatever, but I was also still very good and I could kick some freaking butt. But to relax inside of a scenario like that was completely foreign to me. But with practice, with conditioning, by having a mentor who constantly reminded me, because I couldn't see it, it's a blind spot. It was no, you know, an unknown, but he was teaching me to relax over and over. So I love that you brought that up. And I think it's something. That's point number one. Let's just lock that in. Are you relaxed in the face of the conflict, the criticism, or the attack that may be coming? And then for me, I notice somatically, I feel a particular feeling in my stomach or my chest, like it's a clenching and it's a tightening and it's a clear sense of like hardening internally. And also there's this impulse to want to just respond with like ferocity, right? I feel that energy. I feel all of that. And so that's not me in a relaxed state, you know? So I think maybe you have a sense of what it's not like to be relaxed.
Oh yeah, it's all that. Exactly that. Like I am clear if it's coming at me, it shows up like an attack. And sometimes it's the most benign thing somebody says, right? But that's my trigger. Boom, you're attacking me. You don't attack me. Nobody attacks me. You're fucking dead. You know, like that's the ultimate archetypical energy play that happens when I'm attacked.
Yeah.
Or at least feel attacked. You know, like it's just I perceive that I'm being attacked. That's all. So
that's the sadistic warrior, right? The sadistic warrior is just overly abusive and destructive outwardly.
Right.
Form of protection.
So mine is also a hardening, a tightening, like everything here centers down and it's like for pounds, you know? So, that's real for sure. And there was something I wanted, you know, I think what shows up though is like, it's this natural balance when you can be in the face of the confrontation or a willingness to stand and go into something, but to be relaxed is like, there's a balance there that, like you said, you don't know until you know. You don't actually have any contrast of being off balance if you're always off balance. So there's just finding what that is and meditation. What are some ways that you can find balance? I don't know. You got any ideas?
I will say some things about that. And I think that, you know, part of it is the willingness to confront. And because the flip side, both you and I, Brian, share a common personality structure, which is like high confront, challenging, willing to go to town, willing to battle. Fight is really our first response. We're not really people to run. We're going to run towards the problem. But there's another dynamic that runs a lot of men, which is the flee, right? The avoider. And I think we need to address that briefly too, because, you know, and then I'll get into what your question is there is like, you know, it really just, the answer is in confronting and really stepping into it. Because look, a great skateboarder or Olympic athlete or football player, like these are people, we look at them and we admire their skills, right? The gymnast. What we often don't realize is that athlete or that high performer, business success person, whatever, they have been confronting conflict, breakdown, failure more than the average person, which is what makes them so extraordinary. And that is the access. So whatever domain it is in, if it's in relationship conversations and communication, it could be online social media connection and interaction. It's like there's a lot of challenging, there's a lot of attacks, there's criticisms, there's dismissing that happens, and just confusion and people not getting what you're saying and or twisting your words around, and you know those things happen to all of us. And if we could just avoid it, and some people that is their strategy and they pride themselves in that. And sometimes that has its place for sure. But I also caution on the other side of error here, because it's like, if you avoid all conflict and all confrontation, like some people were criticizing me because I was engaging with these people online, particularly a bunch of Christians that were recently attacking me, even though I love Jesus and preach Jesus and teach the Bible and got a whole channel dedicated to that stuff. But it doesn't matter. The Christians can be like that too. And maybe even more so. And so there's criticism about me engaging, but I was like, my engagement though, maybe to you it looks like a problem because your strategy is avoid and just deny any communication. But for me, I learn. I may start in a conflict tension state. I may feel defensive. I may feel like I want to attack, and maybe I get a little wordy like that. But I notice myself doing that, just like me sparring with my Sifu. You may not want to spar with a Kung Fu master, right, who's dedicated his whole life since childhood to Kung Fu and is just, total badass. That doesn't seem like something you want to do, right? But like by putting myself in that scenario over and over again, I mean, I had to be humbled and learn some things, and I made a lot of mistakes and got corrected a lot. But it was through that correction that I found my ground, that when conflict, like real physical conflict, had come to me after training with him, I was relaxed. My nervous system was not going crazy. I didn't have I was just chill because I was trained and I was conditioned to just be with it, But I had to make a lot of mistakes. I had to fall short many times in my handling of my own energy, my own internal, and this is more at a physical level, but in communication, it's similar, right? Like there's a tension, there's a resistance, there's a tightness, and it's like, am I being relaxed? Am I responding from that tense place? Because he was always coaching me, right? Relaxed. You don't want to respond from that tense place because you lose power, right? All that constraint internally, that tension internally, it reduces or it causes resistance and reduces the flow, the throughput, the potential throughput of your expressive power, which you need either to attack, to, or block, or to move out of the way. Like if you're too rigid, it can slow you down. And so by that fluidity, it's like finding that right balance, So I'm learning still in communication, how to be communicative, relaxed, connecting, challenging, right? Don't want to be a doormat. We're going to talk about the boundaries thing. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. I'm going to pause there. Said a lot.
No, that's brilliant and beautiful. And I think that's what we're all searching for.
Yeah.
Is the balance in that. And I guess just to say one thing for the people who have a natural avoidance strategy, the only thing to recognize, I think, is that we're all running from something consistently and we're just unaware of it. If you're aware of it, then you can now see that you are just being controlled by life's experiences that are that thing that you keep avoiding. Every time that kind of person walks in a room, you have to leave. Well, is that freedom? Hell no. Like you're just being run around life by these things you're avoiding.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I want to have the relaxed, just be with whatever is in our presence. That's the freedom. That's the power that God, that your source, that life is calling you for. Like you were born for this. You are the substance, and we want you to have that. So
that's so good.
That's all I have to say about that.
That's good. So we'll wrap up the God alignment, topic 1, God alignment versus ego reaction. We're responding from the center of our divinity, and divinity is the substance, the source. God is not concerned when anything in the universe goes any particular way because it comes out of God as a source. And so what we're saying here is that it's possible for a human being to really live in such high God alignment that you are literally unaffected by praise or criticism, right? You literally just are grounded in the beingness of being itself. And whatever is happening in the universe, your universe, it's all inside of you and technically beneath you, right? But when you're ego reacting, which is from your wounds, because ego is a construct of our effort to try and escape real physical or emotional pain that we've been through in our life, which generates a fear of ever experiencing emotional or physical pain again. And then our filters are scanning our environment and all this stuff coming into our sensory input and saying, is this like something painful I went through before? Do I need to fight, flee, fawn, freeze, or flop? And that's basically the only response that the human conditioning will do. But there's a sixth option, And that sixth option is align with the power that is inherent in being. It does not need to do anything to be something. It is transcendent. It is invincible, hence the invincible man, name that we've been sharing. It's like the human is not invincible. We know that a human being can be destroyed, but there's a quality of life within us that we can become so cognizant of, so present to, that we live more from that as a source and literally are impervious, unmesswithable in every way. And so if that's the standard, now we set the standard, like that's it. If I'm messwithable, right? If someone's disturbing my peace, that's an opportunity, which Brian, you were just beautifully pointing to, right? Instead of avoiding that, it's an opportunity to take a deeper look. What is it within me that's not at peace? I know this external stimulus, this person saying this or doing that or not doing this or saying this, they're exposing something in me that's not at rest. Rather than attacking out there, which is the natural automatic response for a lot of us, or running away completely, we dive in, we welcome the emotion and the feeling. It's this, without the somatic awareness, there's no hope in really breaking free. You can't do this just in your head. You have to check in with your body. The body's communicating whether you're safe feeling or not. And so we can bring safety and regulate our own nervous system. And it starts by just honoring how we feel. So if you feel tension in your heart, like I do, I feel it there, or in my stomach, that's where I feel it. It's like, oh, can I just welcome that feeling? Like, could I breathe into that for a moment? That's a way that we can begin to realign with the God space of being versus the human conditioning. And so that's our goal. It's to bring men out of ego reaction into inner God alignment.
Yeah, absolutely. It just brought up for me, you say honoring those feelings. And I mean, I don't know that we as human beings, most of us have a good idea of what it is to honor something. And
it's never been modeled for us in the most part.
Yeah, we rarely see somebody like, oh, all right, this is the honor, right? Like,
right.
We don't see that. And
honor means grant being, like give it space to just be what it is.
Yeah. And that's all like humans beings need, is to learn how to honor somebody else's experience, even of you. Like they're triggered, they're having what they have, they believe what they believe. Let them have their experience. Why are you so affected by it? Right? So this is the intellectual workings you need to work out so that you can get to, let me just let them be, grant being.
That's right.
Honor. Right?
That's so good.
So from the honor, then let's talk about the communication.
I was just about to say, nonviolent communication, we're popping in. And emotional mastery. They go hand in hand, because in order to effectively apply nonviolent communication, which is really good practices and distinctions, the emotional mastery part is the ground. It's the foundation. Because if your emotions are awry, you can know all about nonviolent communication in your head. But when push comes, I know this because I knew nonviolent communication, but my emotional mastery was not high enough to support the operation of it and the application of it.
So let's talk about how does one become emotionally masterful?
Yeah. So yeah, here we're going to talk about learning how to speak your truth, like what's really true for you, no matter what it is, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant. It's still important to be expressed. It's how you do it though, without losing your soul, without losing like alignment with your divine purpose, soul aligned with divinity. And we're going to talk about, the nonviolent communication structure, which basically is, it's a frame, it's a framework. And the first thing we're doing in nonviolent communication is we're understanding that there's an observation first. There's something that's happening. Okay. And we want to distinguish then the difference between feelings and interpretations. Because some people say, well, like, I feel like you're rejecting me. But feeling like you're rejecting me is not a feeling by definition. Feelings have to do with what's going on inside of you. Rejecting me is what Marshall Rosenberg in Nonviolent Communication said is an interpretation of somebody else's behavior. They may be rejecting you, that may be true, but it may not be true. Either way, what's more important is what are you feeling? Because underneath every feeling, and I love the distinction he made, he said every feeling, whether it's a pleasant or unpleasant feeling is driven by whether your needs are met, which produce pleasant feelings, or your needs are not met. And he's just saying there's, look, these basic universal human needs. And when the universal human needs are met for safety, belonging, these things, then we feel good. And when they're not met, we start to feel bad. And so, but that's typically not distinguished. It's what's happening. It's the wiring under the board. It's the operational mechanism. But we're so externally focused that it's like, you said something and I feel bad, therefore it must be your fault, or it must be the circumstance or the condition. We don't tend to look at, is there something in me that's not being met, some need? And now that I identify that, what can I do to supply that, even though this is happening out here, even though you're not being what I want you to be, even though my expectations are not being met. So by distinguishing our needs, then he says we can make a request. And when we make a request, Brian and I have learned in a lot of our training in the background that people can either accept your request, they can flat out deny it, or they can counter your request and position some other possibility. Either way, we make a request without attachment, or Marshall Rosenberg says it becomes a demand. And a demand he considers to be violent communication, because now you're trying to control, force, and manipulate another human being, which is honestly where a lot of relationships devolve. And I'm admitting, like, I've been in relationships that I'm demanding. And it's like, and I don't see that. I don't distinguish that. And I don't realize that I'm basically overriding the autonomy, the safety, right? The individual authority of an individual, right? I'm just not honoring that. And so I'm disrupting their basic universal need. And so we do this all the time. And there's a million ways that we're doing it. And there's a lot of different needs. But it's so common to just be however we are in communication that we're violently communicating and thinking it to be normal.
Yeah, I think the only thing I want to add there is that if to know a real request is very foreign. Like, there's very few people, and I can even notice it in myself when I ask and make a request. If there's a consequence that's going to come with it, it's a demand. There has to be no consequence for them to say yes, no, or a counter. There's no consequence.
That's right.
In my request.
That's good.
That comes in a delivery of how I ask that thing. And that, like, I almost never have a real request. It becomes super conscious of me to go, okay, I've got to make a request. Or the only time it shows up for me unconsciously is when I'm just sharing authentically, when I'm just being what's there and I'm vulnerable. That's how I'll know. A lot of my requests are just, you can say yes, no, maybe, and I'm not reactive about it. I'm not going to do anything because of it. I'm just making a request. You know, I've got to come up with another solution. You're not the answer, right? Or you don't have what I'm looking for. So that's just super rare for somebody to actually make true requests.
Yeah. We're not taught this in school, man. Like we need to be educated, and then we need to drill and practice this over and over, just like any skill, because it's so foreign. The structure of the framework, I'm going to give a real example. First and foremost, the structure is, what's the observation? What's happening? What do you feel? What's the underlying need that's not being met? And then what is your specific request? So say you're in a conflict with your significant other, or your kids are not doing something that you want them to do, or whatever. So it's like, honey, I just want to share with you, I'm having this experience here and I want to be in healthy communication with you. But I noticed that when you say that thing that you say in the car, when I'm driving and I'm trying to get us somewhere, I notice that I feel disconnected from you. I feel hurt. I feel a bit of anger, and I feel this defensiveness rising up within me. And I'm not blaming you for those feelings, right? By the way, I'm just telling you that that's what I'm observing in me. When you say that, and it seems like, I interpret it as criticism, or that I interpret that you think I don't know what I'm doing or where I'm going. But I start to feel this disconnection. I feel a little hurt by that. And I feel a bit of anger and defensiveness. And I realize that what I really need is what I really need is your loving support.
Mm.
And it would be great if when you communicate that with me, if you were to just say, hey, honey, I know you probably got this, but I'm noticing something that I want to share with you that may help us get to where we're going a little faster, or whatever, you know. And it's like you present a model of how you would like it to be handled. It takes more time. We have a lot of habits of just communicating however we want, whenever we want. We want to be free to do whatever we want, but the problem is it ruins relationships. Most marriages fail and end in divorce, 60% now or so.
Yeah, let's just cut to the chase there. It's not effective.
It's not effective.
If you want to be effective, it takes this next level of consciousness. So let's bring this back to hate, and in the face of hate.
Mm-hmm.
How is nonviolent communication? How am I going to use that when the troll's there? And how do I make that a habit? I don't know. Give me the substance here. How do you connect?
That's good. Same thing. You know, I notice when I read your response to my message or whatever it is, if it's an online thing, I notice that I feel disconnected. I'm interpreting that you're judging me and that you don't really care for me. I don't know if that's true or not, but I notice that. And when I think that, then I feel disconnected. I feel defensive, and I notice that I want to write an attack or defense response back to you. What I really need is to know that you understand my communication and that you actually care about me. So my request is that you would let me know, where's your heart really at with me before you just offer your criticism or your judgment. I think something like that.
Oh, that's so beautiful, because like if you carried that conversation on with any hater in your life, it would be clear who you should be in contact with continually and not. This is the clear boundary that you need to set for. If you could say that, and then the people who just keep abusing it, that's where you're like, no more.
Yeah.
You don't need to do that, right?
It's good.
So it's just so clear. It makes it clear for you and for them around, are we going to continue any more time together, even in an intention to connect with each other? That looks like online, that looks like being around each other. And this is hard when it's family members. I totally understand that, but the decision needs to be made. Is there any more time we should spend here connecting about anything? Should we continue this relationship? If you've communicated the way Vince just did, and it doesn't keep going, it's done. Move on.
Mm-hmm.
Make the cut. Move away. And there'll be a time you could always reconnect, but you need to get some space. So I don't know. Anything else you want to say about that for those who struggle?
Yeah, I think it's all about just taking ownership of everything that's happening in your experience, even if it appears that somebody else is doing this or being that. Because I can admit that I'm a bit antagonistic, to say the least, and I bring some of that into my space because I will, just sharply speak what I see, or what I stand for, and full knowing I am conscious that that's going to stir the pot a bit. And sometimes that's deliberate and intentional. I'm still evaluating whether I should shift or change that at all, because part of me is like, sees that people benefit from the dynamic. So, but either way, it's like, I'm not a victim in communication. There is a way that I can insert, even if I don't know how to do all the steps, observe just what's happening, speak to what's happening without judgment and force. What am I feeling? What are my actual needs? What's the request that I actually have in a nonviolent communication way? I can at least say, I know that I want to shift the way we're doing communication here. I can start that and create a buffer. The hard part is that we have emotional addictions, and the fighting energy can be so alluring. So that's the thing to watch out for. And also separating behavior of other people in communication and whatever from our worth, because oftentimes it's automatically tied in. If they're criticizing me, don't agree with me, then the deeper hidden thing is like, then maybe I'm not worthy. That's not usually conscious at all, but we want to ask ourselves, am I somehow measuring my worth and value right now from an internal space according to what their words reflect. Because I know I struggle with that, but not consciously.
This is the value of God,
Yes, exactly.
right?
That's good.
Like, because without a God, the only thing you're going to honor and revere is your experience in your moment by moment experience of life.
Mm,
Naturally, if you're in a conversation and somebody starts giving you some hate, you're going to experience the hate as yourself, and your worth is going to be tied to that,
that's right.
right? And this experience of worth, right? So once you, here's the true value, even if you're an atheist, the logic of developing a relationship with something higher than yourself, to adhering and bowing to a God, is that literally you can step aside from your moment by moment experience of life
Mm-hmm.
to adhere to something greater than yourself and find the self-worth that you are, that is natural, that is ever present, that is life.
So
So,
good.
I don't know, go.
Yeah,
What
and
do
I think that's where the beauty of really studying Jesus for yourself, rather than just listening to what other people are saying about Jesus, reading Jesus' words, um, getting a sense of what you know God is saying through the man Jesus Christ to you. Because if you do read that and you do focus on that, you're going to find that there's this communication about how worthy and accepted and wanted and desired you are, and that's really the ultimate message that, Brian, you're alluding to there. And I think a lot of Christians, unfortunately, miss this mark, right? Like, the message is God was willing to give everything for you, that you would realize how valuable you are to God. And it's like it gets lost in so many other ways, but that's the fundamental message, that if you could just understand that you're so worth it, then your self-esteem goes through the roof, and you literally become impervious, because again, the wounds are what cause the reaction. And if your wounds are healed because you realize your worth is already established from the beginning, and you have a deep, intimate, and personal communion with that. So when you pray to God, and if you're talking with God, and you can be open, and you know that you're being heard, and you can feel, and listen, that may not be your living experience yet, but have you tried? Have you practiced praying? Have you explored this? Like any skill, like, because I'm telling you, not just me, but millions of people are praying and having communion with God in their own heart, and they feel the love of God flowing. They feel the inspiration. They feel the relaxation. They can sense, I mean, it's a real visceral thing. And when you have that, your heart relaxes, because you know there's a presence of something greater within you that does actually care for you.
Absolutely. And just to tag on to what you were saying, it's a relationship. It's not going to be divine immediately. I mean, it is divine,
Right.
this thing concept, but you haven't connected enough with it. And you, by default of being a human being, start disconnected. You grow up as a child, and all of life is amazing, and you're just in it, in the flow. And then, like, this ego thing takes control without you fucking knowing about it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just running the show. And the call, the rebirth, the awakening that we are calling for mankind is to realize that thing is not you, to get back and develop this relationship with the divine. That's the whole purpose of all of this.
So
And
good.
once you have that, now you have an anchor. You have a source of power that is you, that is of you, that is all of you, that you can go to, that isn't your experience of a hater, that isn't what you're talking to and dealing with in your ego, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how do we take this into the next section? What,
Shadow,
where?
yeah, it's perfect. It's literally flows right into it. So shadow projection and the mirror principle is topic 3. And the fundamental theme of this topic is that what triggers you is teaching you, right?
Mm.
And so one of the things that I find is that the trolls, the people online that seem to be so resistant and poking, and just they push all the right buttons in you, or the wrong buttons, whatever buttons you don't want them to push. But that the trolls are reflecting are unhealed aspects of ourselves. Wherever we're experiencing a trigger, like mine yesterday was with this kid who doesn't, was arguing with me about saying bad words, like, curse words and stuff. And like, for me, that's been a point of communication and engagement with people in recovery centers. And, for me, it's meaningless. It doesn't mean anything. It's, and people can say bad words. It doesn't offend me. Right. And I'd rather not be offended. I'd rather stay connecting with people, and not let language, like words, become a divisive factor. Anyway, I was going back and forth with this guy, but I was starting to get frustrated with him because he was just using chat GPT AI responses 100% of the time, not coming to light, and just like really just unrelenting, not getting my communication, that, I use this in an effective manner. And I was just like I was feeling the tension, that tightness, and that like, I want to grab this kid and just like, put him in a chokehold until he goes to sleep, and I feel that anger building up inside of me. And I'm like, why is this bothering me so much? And it's like, he doesn't agree with me. He's trying to correct me, change me. And he's using God as like, and I'm just like resisting. And I'm like, I notice like when that's happening, I'm like, actually my heart's like, well, God must be doing something to me, right? God must be calling something up right now because I'm feeling that internal disturbance. And I do realize in reflection and hindsight, I'm like, yeah, there's times that I'm using language, bad words, that don't need to be used. You know what I mean? Like, I don't need to actually speak that way. And the reason why is not because the words are so bad necessarily, but in my experience, they are associated with certain people and energies and patterns. So it's like they're like the language is anchors to unhealthy dynamics in my past. And so that started coming through for me this morning. And I'm like, okay, right before this call, even I started really observing that. I'm like, I just started submitting because I notice I'm still resisting this kid.
Mm.
And if I'm resisting him, then there's something I'm not dealing with inside myself.
Mm-hmm.
He's resisting me, but he's just reflecting my resistance. Is he not? Right. So it's like, if he's resisting me, I got to be resisting him if I'm seeing resistance there. Because if I'm not resisting him, then his resistance is not resistance to me. His resistance is nothing to me. So I was almost at that place, but there was still that little something. And I'm like, what is that? And it's just that. It's like, okay, I think the lesson is my mouth could be anchoring me to places in my heart, my mind, my conditioning that I'm asking for freedom from.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be a more loving person, and I want to be more of a representative and a leader of leaders. I had a dream, by the way, of President Putin. And it was so profound. I mean, I've been praying for the leaders of this world, right? But this dream last night, like he was in my dream and he was near me, but I wasn't talking with him. And I just was looking at him and I saw sadness. I saw like his soul. And I was like, wow, like this dude is like, he's struggling inside. And my heart was filled with compassion and love for him, just filled. I'm like, I need to talk to him. I want to see if I can help him, if I can connect with him. And then the dream shifted to something else. And then it flowed back and he was with me. We're in this car, like a limo, right? And I was in the limo with him and he was sitting across from me and I'm just talking with him. We're dialoguing and I'm trying to understand him and to see where I can help and support and just let him know, hey man, just want you to know, I got you. I got your back. I got your heart. Like I understand you and I understand your pain and your challenges and like everything you're facing. And all I wanted to do was create him and let him know that I understand him so that he could have relief. And then I woke up from that and I was like, wow, I have no real affinity to Putin whatsoever other than the news media, right? And I have no love or hate for him one way or the other. It's just, I don't know him. But that was really touching to me. And that's the quality of heart that I'm alluding to that I really want to operate from. It's like, yeah, maybe he started a war. Maybe he's caused for murdering all these people. But, well, what's the real answer? Fighting and attacking him? Because no one listens to that. Or is it getting his soul and letting him know, I'm here for you? That's going to bring relief so that he doesn't feel the need to be aggressive. So that was interesting.
Yeah, well, I guess what shows up for me is this is blessing the enemy, right? And how rich your heart would have to be, especially for a man like Putin, which my first inclination is the easiest way is just kill him. Just like, we got to kill that guy. Get that guy off the planet. Of course, then my reflection comes as like, again, that will not solve anything. There will just be a usurper. There will just be the next level. There will just be, and we'll just keep cutting the heads off these Medusas, right? The answer is in what you said. which is bringing that love and compassion, because that love is the most captivating energy every human being wants, needs, responds to. And that's how we change the world,
That's the
is
mirror principle.
more human beings.
You know, what triggers you teaches you. So if you hate Putin, or you hate Trump, or you hate the Democrats and their perspective, if you hate any side, you have now become the very thing that you believe naively that you are somehow defending the world from. Like, you literally just become the thing
Correct.
itself.
Yeah.
Like you want to kill Putin? Okay, like then you just became the very thing that, so it's projection, right? It's like, so to me, the world is reflecting our heart to us all the time. And it's like the Bible says that all authorities have been placed by God. Very few people, even Christians, would even accept that idea. That means the Adolf Hitlers, the Putins, the freaking Trumps, the whatever you think, like they're all in the position of authority by God. And now you have to take this radical perspective. But remember, Jesus, he died at the hands of authorities, and he said, you would have no power over me unless my Father in heaven gave it to you. He accepted his crucifixion because he was so conscious and so infinitely secure of his immortality, and that he was above all principalities, authorities, and worldly dominion. He knew who and what he was. He still had to agonize with the idea of facing this horrific and painful execution. And yet he did not waver from the conviction that he would resurrect forevermore, because he cannot be destroyed. And so that's the model that God is giving us. It's like, here's what you really are. The world is just a test for you to figure out whether you're really going to align with that or not. And Jesus showed the way and the truth, which a lot of people talk about that as like a religious exclusion, that somehow Christianity is the truth and everything else is not. But that's not what he's pointing to. If you really believe that he is the way, the truth, and the life, then you believe that all authorities are established by God, whether you love them or not, whether they hang you on a cross or not. And if you read Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, this guy was in a concentration camp and lost his wife and family members. He survived. He found compassion for his persecutors, and he survived through his love and acceptance. He faced horrific things that most humans will never have to deal with, but he abandoned his attack thoughts. Just like Jesus. This is a Jewish guy, but he lived the gospel.
Right. He is it.
He is it. So
right?
More than those who say they believe in it.
Just to throw the carrot out there, it's the freedom that's available when you stop resisting. The resistance is the pain. The resistance is the cause, the source, the experience of everything we don't want. And it's like we're naturally pre-programmed robots running around our life, resisting these things that have happened in our past or in past lives, whatever. The point is, you're experiencing resistance, and our call from God, from your source, is to be free. And your agency here is to figure out how to take that resistance and let it bloom. Well, the quick answer is find love, right? But how do you go from this side of the spectrum to that side of the spectrum?
Let's put a question into it. What if you start to look at everything that seems to be happening outside of you or to you as happening within you? Because the fact is, whatever seems to be happening out there, your experience of it is happening inside of you. There are thoughts, there are emotions, there are feelings. And most of us are avoiding our defenses and our attacks, and our, drama is really our effort to escape the inner. So in this, shadow projection and mirror principle theme, what triggers you teaches you. Your triggers are your access to your wounds. And if you start using the criticism, the attacks, the painful events that are happening and circumstances, things not going your way, expectations being, crushed to the floor, then you can look within and say, okay, what's the pain that I'm feeling? And honestly, I know this sounds overly simplified, but it's like, can I just love and be with how I feel right now without trying to get rid of this pain? That's the practice. That's what changed my life. It saved my soul. I had a conversation with my ex-girlfriend. She was such a trigger for me. I had a conversation with her yesterday. I'm getting married. She's getting married to someone new. We prayed for each other. I couldn't even talk about Jesus with her. She was like, if I mentioned the Bible, she would just shut me down. And I prayed for her yesterday and her relationship and her future. And she prayed right back with me and for me and blessed me. And I was like, wow, I've never had that happen before with her, and it was like, our relationship is truly transformed. And at the end, she's like, I love you, Vince. And I was like, wow, I love you too, Elena. I was so grateful because that's what I wanted when we were together. But when we were together, there was just so much drama and a lot of triggers in both of us. But we have owned that. We have realized, she admits that she was avoiding specific painful things from her past, projecting onto me onto her. Yeah.
Beautiful. Like that's
so
right?
yeah, so she was my mirror and I was her mirror, and we both got it. But I got it first, especially as the man. I had to really get it first, and I had to really own that. The last time I visited her there, because I had to get some stuff there a few years ago, I went there and she got so nasty with me, and I think she got a little jealous because of girl thing or something like that. There's something happening, and she started just criticizing me, and she was like follow me around and just like da, 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 and I was getting like really frustrated, annoyed, and you know what? I just went down into the room, and she followed me into the room as I'm trying to clean out my stuff, and I just dropped to my knees and I faced the window and I just said, "Thank you, Jesus, thank you, God, for just loving on Elena." And I'm praying, and she's literally, while I'm praying, she's like, "You're so full of it." She's like, "You're such a faker. Like, you don't mean anything you're saying." She's just still pointing literally her finger pointing at me, attacking me with her words. She was angry. And the more she did that, the more I just let go. And the more I just trusted that my word mattered. And she got up finally and she walked out. And then I felt led to go out, and I asked her to step out into the hall, and she did. And I just started breaking down into tears. And I just cried. I said, "I don't want to hurt you or fight with you." And I just poured my heart out, and she just like stopped and she listened, and then she just grabbed me and she hugged me, and she just said, "I just want to be seen." And I realized you just want to be seen also. And neither one of us are seeing each other. I remember her words. She said that. I'm like, and I wasn't aware of that, but when she said that, it made sense. I was like, yeah, I just don't feel seen by you. And she's like, but she was getting vulnerable and saying she didn't feel that I was seeing her. And of course, that's her childhood wound. But yeah, she just hugged me. And I remember she hugged me so long. I was ready to break the hug, but it was like 5 minutes in and she still didn't want to let go. And it was just like this very gentle acceptance. And that broke something that was like this enmeshment. And it's possible. And look, I got a scar on my head right here, right? She threw a wooden statue, and split my head open. That's how, you want to talk about how dramatic the relationship is. I didn't ever touch her physically, never, not even once. I did push her down one time because she was attacking me with her, she was pushing me, punching at me. And I turned her around and I pushed her away and she fell, but that was it. But not violently or hard, but we had a lot of drama going on, but we transformed it. And yesterday she's telling me she loves me and is blessing me to go. So it's possible when you apply what Brian and I are talking about here.
So beautiful. And that's the blessing, right? Here's the last part of it, right? So why am I going to bless anybody about this?
Well, we had the sacred boundaries and compassion part 2, which is part 4, and then the blessing the hater. So we can save that for next time if you want. Sacred boundaries with compassion, which is about protecting, also protecting yourself versus getting yourself making yourself a doormat.
I feel like we covered a lot of that, and there's still maybe something is missing about establishing boundaries with compassion.
Right.
What do you see?
Well, part of what we have is that guarding the garden of your heart, mind, and inner world, right? Like, let's look at your inner world as a garden, and guarding it though with grace, with compassion and sensitivity. We don't have to let everyone into our inner space necessarily. Sometimes like the empath is so open and sensitive to the world, and some people feel like they have to be nice and open to everybody, and that just allows an infiltration, and the garden gets filled with garbage. that's where we need to develop the warrior energy before we get into the lover. And the warrior is the one who does set the boundaries. Every one of us has a warrior that wants to protect us, right? That's willing to fight if it has to, right? But not out of like sadistic, abusive kind of nature. But it's like sometimes there's a time where you have to really stand up for yourself.
Yeah.
But to
But
do it
let me
with
ask you something.
clean, firm, heart aligned boundaries.
Let's go a little bit, Aaron. This is brilliant and it's true from a protecting the garden, as you said.
Mm-hmm.
And there's really a you don't know what the garden is unless you have this idea of divine. You don't you don't have that experience. And I'm speaking to those who may say God doesn't exist. Well, it doesn't exist for you. And the idea is you need to fucking create it, because this is the value of having the garden, is that you know what there is to set a boundary around. And so I don't know, how might you come to the know
That's
this
good.
better?
Yeah. I think seeing God as first of all, our definition of God has to be good.
Hmm.
A lot of people, a lot of like atheists and so on, like their definition, it's not that they don't believe in the real God. They don't know God other than what they've heard about God, and their definitions of God don't line up with anything sensible. Or they see a lot of religious zealot type people and they naturally are like, yeah, they're, I don't want any of that. And so unfortunately, they make their definition of God based on the human imperfections and distortions rather than
Right.
exploring the possibility earnestly, which I was doing. I wasn't a blind believer. I didn't really ascribe to any religion, and I was resistant to Christianity specifically. But I did have one thing going for me. I was willing to test the hypothesis. Okay, I was reading all these different people who talk about higher power in AA, spiritual experience, enlightenment, or Satori, and the Zen Buddhism, and all these different perspectives of like, there's a state of alignment you can get to that's higher than the average. I'm like, okay, makes sense, but I need to experience it because it sounds cool, but if I
Yeah.
want to know what it's like. And so I had that passion to figure that out, or not just figure it out in my mind, but have a face-to-face and experiential encounter. And so when I got in face-to-face with Jesus Christ as like a sudden living reality, it was like unexpected for sure, but most sensible, but not what most people think. And that's the challenge for me who loves Jesus. And then sharing what I experience of Jesus doesn't line up with the average, even Christian's idea, right? They tend to think of Jesus objectively and as a character. But what I experienced was the universal principle, a law that exists throughout the cosmos, which the Bible speaks powerfully to. But through me and through everyone, through all things, all things were created by him, for him, and through him, and return unto him. Like him as a source, I'm the Alpha, the Omega. I got that experience of Jesus Christ, like the cosmic principle of Jesus Christ, which was personal, but also immortal, like transcending the average human. And it was just, I can say all these words, and it's like when I speak about it, I am referencing the visceral memory of the encounter, and I'll speak that, and people are just like, don't have that experience, so they resist. Christians will resist me because I share that, and it's just way over their head. They're just like, it doesn't fit into the box,
Yeah.
And most people base their definitions of reality on their very finite interpretive lenses. If I haven't experienced it and I don't know it, then it's false, right? It's like, well, yeah, I'm not expecting you to believe me, but don't auto reject it. I'm asking you, test it for yourself.
So the here again is, how do you know you're in alignment? How do you know how to be confrontational and relaxed? Like, this is the balance for you to figure out if there's a God, right? Is inside of being with what you know and experience and being willing and open, right? This openness and yet being grounded in what's real for you, right? There's that. So as soon as you say it's not real, you're not open, right? You have to still be open, but be resonant with what's real. And this is just the
Right.
conversation that people need to be having all over their lives, all over the context. And I just think we're doing a great job. But I wonder, is there anything missing for someone I don't know. You'd have to leave it in the comments. What else can we have for
That's a
you?
good idea. Comment, so the last thing I'll just wrap up is like, you don't, so as far as the sacred boundaries with compassion, be aware that how you feel may indicate a real problem out there or may not. You have to investigate a little bit. You said something earlier, Brian, that was great. It was like, share like the nonviolent communication format with them. And if even after doing that, they continue to be antagonistic and hurtful and harmful, it's like, that's a point where you need to block or delete, disengage with intention, but not bitterness, because the bitterness is going to live in you, right? So we don't forgive people for their sake necessarily alone, although that is a higher perspective. But it starts with forgiving to release yourself from the emotional charge. Our bodies are secreting different hormones, our brain is secreting different chemicals, and we're at the effect of our thoughts, emotions, and our feelings the most, first and foremost, right? So bitterness, resentment, hate, it's affecting my chemistry and literally there's science that shows that our gene production of proteins is distorted, right? So the quality of proteins, which are the building blocks of our physical structures, all our cells, tissues, and organs, right? The quality of gene output is reduced when you're under that kind of stress for long periods of time. So for your own sake, check your heart. Am I bitter, resentful? And then this is where having God as a something other to communicate that's still part of you, not separate really, but like, but having, you have flow. It's like, God, hey, I'm noticing I'm really angry right now. And I notice that I just want to choke this person or attack this person. And I'm feeling really bitter and resentful. And like, what if you could just tell God everything? Like, I just want to strangle this person to death, God. And, like, confess your sins, right? Like God's not condemning you. I promise you. You could say anything, no matter how nasty or ugly it is, and God wants you to pour out. And when I say God, it's like God is the space of all being. And when you open yourself up to that, what's interesting is you express your hatred, your bitterness, your unforgiveness, honestly, earnestly, all the feelings just the way they are. It's like God hears that. And if somebody hears it, it gets complete. It's like, you know what? I was hateful, but now that I said it and now that I know I was heard for it, I'm not so angry anymore. I feel good. I got that off my chest, and I think that's what prayer fundamentally should be for most of us. It's a way to get it off your chest. Don't censor your communication. I promise you, Jesus is not offended by anything you can say in your heart. It's like, he's like the most understanding being in the universe, right? Yeah. He gets that you want to kill people sometimes. He gets that you feel worthless and that you don't feel like you matter. But if you start talking it out with the God in your heart, like you have this personal relationship with someone who loves you, listens to you, cares about everything you have to say, and never ever responds with anything but "I got you." That's the kind of God that we need to have a relationship with.
The only thing I will add in here is that all these can become this experience where you're being with the ego and having it. Like, they come in Buddhism. They come from all other disciplines and honoring something other than this, right? And that's really what, if I have a mission with what we're doing, my own mission is to call upon all believers, anybody who has a distinction around what is divine and God, to come out together to support whatever path any other human is on. If it works for them, we're in support of it. And we'll know it works by there's more love. It's just that simple. And if it's not, if it's something they're believing that's obviously divisive and full of hate, then we know that's not it. And I need to confront that.
Yeah.
Right. This type of, I call it a bodhisattva, somebody who's willing to be in the fire, right? And come confront and be relaxed, save them as the presence you talked about so much, to be the presence of God. Like, that's what everybody wants and needs. We can transform this world. It can happen. The tipping point is not far away, right? But it's going to take a willingness and a team effort inside of how do we coordinate that. That's my mission. So
I love that. I want to add on to your mission. Part of my mission is to distinguish the value of other paths. That because I love Jesus so much, I interact with a lot of Christians and churches, and there's just this idea that every other religion is wrong or demonic. Yoga's demonic, Buddhism's demonic, meditation that's Eastern is demonic. I heard a pastor say it the other day, and it's like, wow, that's just not my living experience, bro. Like, I'm not coming from theory, something I read in a book or heard in a seminary. I practiced Zen Buddhist meditation, and you know what it did? It made me a better person right away. I was less reactive. I became more internally aware. I started listening differently to people. Like, yeah, maybe I wasn't in touch with Jesus Christ yet. Maybe I didn't have the full glory of God's love for humanity the way that I did later, and I had no biblical truth in my heart, but I was starting to live out biblical principles that I didn't know yet. And only in hindsight can I look back and say, oh, wow, that was beginning my process. And it's so easy, and it's weird to me that I see these Christians who start with these other paths and they did it. And I actually, as I said, it's weird. I'm like, no, it's not. I understand how things work. They get a word from another pastor or from another Christian, and that word says it's demonic, and then they just, to simplify their life, they just want to cut off everything else because they don't want to maintain the integrity of a larger structure of consciousness. And it's just simpler to just cut it all off and just focus on the one thing that feels good right now. And it's like, okay, now Christianity's thing. And I love Christianity. I think, like as a whole, it comes from something great at the center. But to me, Zen Buddhism, the Hinduism that I was studying, I never believed in individual gods. I feel like I always had like a higher perspective. I'm like, all the gods. Oh, you know why? Joseph Campbell. Joseph Campbell did teachings on the myths of the world, and he has a book called The Many Masks of God, and he was just fascinated with God being reflected in my college health instructor would talk about Joseph Campbell, and he was raving, and this is nothing to do with health, but he was rave about Joseph Campbell. So I started getting books from the library, and that was a powerful influence for me because Joseph Campbell talked about God. But his perspective was like, look how God shows up in all these places. And he was bringing a beautiful light of inclusion and the many different facets and faces of God. And if you read the Bible, there's many faces of characters in the Bible too. But if you study other mythology of other religions and their history and their background and their stories, there's a commonality that can be seen. And I want to get that forth, which is kind of what you're alluding to. Is like we want to embrace all of that. It's like, somebody may be at this level of consciousness, but we don't want to call that demonic necessarily, although there can be destructive things. But look, in the Christian church, there's demonic forces operating. There are bad spells being cast, not the good spell. There are evil, demonic, destructive words.
Call it divisive.
Yeah, and they're hurtful.
Over there is divisive.
Yeah, it's suppressive. There's people getting under religious abuse in there. So we have to have a fair perspective. We have to look deeper than we are. So I'll just close with that on the, and the setting compassionate boundaries for self is really about honoring your heart, your feelings, your emotions. If you're giving love and you're being respectful and honoring of another human being and it's not being met, then it's okay to say no. But I think the first step is to attempt reconciliation with all of your enemies, right? To attempt earnestly to pray, keep your heart open, see if you can see something in you. I think use your enemy as a stepping stone to higher ground. And if that person continues to be antagonistic and just refuses, like I have a particular friend of mine that I've just been giving and generous and connecting to, and he started saying negative things about relationship and projecting. I warned him. I said, look, if you keep doing this, I love you, but I'm protecting my marriage. I'm protecting my future. I'm protecting my life. Like I honored you, and like, I could say a lot about your life and where you're at and what you're doing. And I've been nothing but loving and generous and kind to you. The wall's going up, bro. So that's your warning. You get to decide how to play it. And his last response was still antagonistic and poking at religion and things. Okay. Like I'm not even responding at this point, because I'm going to honor my heart. I fairly communicated with you. I told you what my desire is, to be close with you, to have this, but this is what I need from you. And if you're not going to honor that and you're going to dishonor my heart, I'm going to protect my heart if you won't. So I think we have to have that power to be loving self enough and other in the right way, but sometimes setting those boundaries.
It's beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah,
And it's right into blessing.
right. Blessing the hater, the lover's radical power.
Yeah.
So transforming resistance with love is basically our topic here.
Yeah. I mean, through and through, it has been.
Through and through.
So, that's through and through what life is. This is the context of life, right? It's like transforming resistance through love. If you're an atheist, you could take this path and get it.
That's right.
You don't have, but you will develop a relationship with something. And that's all there is to find, I suppose. So, benefits of blessing the hater. I mean, exercising love, I think, is just like what naturally comes. It can never not be good for you, everybody around you, for the human beings, for consciousness at large, right? Like exercising love and practicing true love. That's another thing. Now, do we need to distinguish love in this conversation? We're not talking about a romantic love, right? We're talking about either brotherly love or even unconditional love, which I would just say we don't have concept of. So rare, which you would actually know what unconditional love is. And I'm not going to pretend to know myself. So, but it's an ideal. It's something for my mind to wrap its head around so that I can do my best to experience that and to be that. So, in loving my enemy, I'm welcoming the thing I believe gives me threat and harm and causes fear. And every time I've done this in my life, what shows up is I was fearful of nothing. And I know between human beings, if I'm willing to take the first step and be loving, it's a mirror. Human beings are just mirrors. They just reflect it back to you.
Yeah.
I just time and time again, I remember I was walking around I was in Thailand, and the thing about Thailand and Thai people is everybody's so smiley, right? And really, the thing is that we're happy and we're showing happiness, and there's this dark shadow side, which is save face. It's called, right?
Mm.
Don't ever let people see you down, right? So there's like this dynamic going through, and you can tell who's saving face and who's joyously expressing something.
Mm.
Right? Can you? I think that's just the question. Can you? I can. And so then I remember I walked through town and I just decided I was going to give the most beaming smile to everyone I passed. And without fail, I don't know if I'm going to say 99%. And let's just say I passed 60 people. Let's just say one person out of those 60 people, which is a little less than 99% or more, uh, they were smiling back. And you can tell when somebody's like, it's a mirror. They can't help it. Even if they don't feel the joy inside, their reflex happens and it comes back to them. So this is a tool we can utilize as human beings to align ourselves. And loving the enemy is just the next step in that. What you got, Vince? What are you hearing there? Anything else to add?
Yeah, I think that sometimes the people that hate us or antagonize us are secretly uh, craving or starving what it is that we have that they don't maybe have. Like they don't understand that. Like they're engaging with us maybe in a hateful way. Example being like a kid that I worked with, Jewish kid. I would talk about Jesus at the workplace, and he would get very antagonistic, and I'd be sharing with other people, and he would mock me and say things, and I didn't get offended, never got defensive. I would help him out. He struggled a lot with his tables to serve. He wasn't really good. I was really very good, and so I was able to handle his tables, and all I did was keep doing that. And but one day he came in after like in the middle of the shift, actually, like when it was kind of quiet, and he asked me to go in the back room with him, and I did. And his name was Ian, and he just dropped to his knees and started crying like a baby. And I was like, "What's going on, bro?" And he's like, "My girlfriend broke up with me. Like, I'm devastated. I don't understand what to do. Can you pray for me?" He asked me. And I was like, wow. And of course I prayed. My heart was never closed to him. I never felt anything offensively towards him. It was just easy for me to love him. Didn't take it personal. Like there was nothing personal about it. And I prayed over him. He invited me then to his synagogue, and I went with him that Sunday to his synagogue, and or Saturday it was maybe, and a great experience. We became really good friends. But I realized his antagonism was he was engaging with me because really what he was hungry for was this deeper part of my heart that eventually it came to light. And so sometimes like that the conflict is actually a passion from each party to get access to that deeper quality within each other. And that's that's a rare perspective to take, but it's one that we can consider, that maybe our hater secretly is starving for the kind of strength and spirit that we have. And we can return the rejection, the attack with, an affirmation of who we really are by how we express ourselves with that person. Recently that kid that I mentioned earlier, I'm just like, just so you know, I care about you. I'm willing to get on a Zoom call with you and have a conversation if you're willing. And then I get a little, I call him out on some stuff, and I said, I'm challenging you, I'm challenging you because I care, and like, just want to make sure that you know that I do. Like, it's like, I feel like I have to put those words in, to keep the doors open to possibilities, because you never know who's going to take that. He may not, but I think that's key. So blessing those who curse us, like, yeah, I'm praying for him. And when I pray for him, it's not that I'm praying for him so he changes. When I pray for someone, I'm praying that my heart will align with divinity and his highest purpose and his greater good. That's how you pray for someone else in a healthy manner. Trying to change, fix, or control someone to be different than they are, it's resisting what's there instead of speaking to and aligning with their higher. You said something like, it's like people are mirrors, right? Like, and so if I'm connecting with a higher potential for this person, and if that's what I'm focused on, then, perception precedes performance. So when I pray, I'm altering my perception of my enemy. Right? And so that's going to come before my performance is going to be driven by how I perceive them. And if I perceive him or her in a higher light, and I perceive them in such a way that I care and I've opened my heart, and I did this in my prayer closet behind the scenes, then the way that I respond next time to the antagonism or attack is going to be mostly driven by that inner perspective that I developed.
Yeah.
That's a practical. So prayer is practical. It's perceptual transformation as a mechanical thing, right? Whether you believe in God or not, your prayers are a format by which you can alter your perceptual landscape. And your perceptual landscape drives everything you will do. If I perceive someone's attacking me and that's my only perception, then my automatic response is going to be protect and defend and attack back or whatever. But if I perceive this person's hurting, maybe they need some help and some guidance, they need love. If I perceive that instead of a threat, well, I'm going to respond very differently. So altering the inner landscape, that's how you bless the hater. That's where you discover the lover's radical power that we're talking about here. That's how you transform resistance with love. I think it's okay to engage in conflict and have tension and resistance, but use it to find the higher ground. Can I find love for this person that is opposing me right now? That's for me. I win. Even if this person never becomes loving to me, I found love within myself in the face of my enemy. So I win, even if they don't want to win with me.
God, I love it when the selfishness just wins out.
Yeah, it's right? Positive selfishness.
Yeah, absolutely. It's good for all of us.
It's good for your enemy. It's good for you, even if they don't change, right?
Yes. And it does take this next level of a radical thinking.
Definitely.
I mean, I don't know, buddy. I think that pretty much says it all. But you know what I love that we brought into this conversation is really the practicalness of the things that we do when we have God, right? But then and I want to just keep talking about that for our audience, not this time, but just in all our conversations, we're trying to hit that, the practical nature of God, how it lies in your day-to-day experience, how you can see it, how you can use God, right? and everything that God provides. And how did we take that from like, I don't believe in this thing? Because I did not. I wasn't going to believe it just to believe it. I had to be grounded in my own experience with what it is. And so that's where Buddhism and meditation had opened the door for me. This is why Vince and I are aligned much, because it opened the door for him. And for any Christian, I'm inclined to say for most Christians, I say you need to find what's good in Buddhism. Let's just stay there, and the meditation that's available there, because your practice of being loving and having a presence of love and being godly, it is lacking. And so I just know the world who resists Christianity is feeling that. And if you're going to open the door with us for everybody to come in alignment with God, you got to get into presence. And so this is your opportunity.
Mm.
Love thy enemy, be altar, pray for it. That's beautiful, Vince. Anything
man.
you would like to pray for us and our audience as we close?
Yeah, I want to close with a couple sentences about your last words there. That presence part is key that you're pointing out. And presence, like why meditation, surrender to God without, prayer is like talking through things, which is important, and perceptual shifting, like I said, and transforming one's heart. And you have to have the words of God, like words that bring life in your heart to pray properly in the first place, pray in a way that gives you life and actually makes a real difference. But then there's the meditation part where it's just sitting quietly, observing one's feelings, thoughts, and emotions, not trying to resist them. Because often we can use prayer to bypass how we're feeling. Why do some people's prayers cause them more problems and not get answered? And that because you're avoiding the deeper layers. And so just sitting with self, being with what's there, and learning to honor without changing, fixing, controlling, manipulating your inner landscape, that gives you access to healing at a deep level. If you're going to have presence, you're going to need to be inwardly conflict free. Your mind cannot be trying to escape the pain of your past over and over. It's going to or you have these distorted perspectives because your mind is so noisy and distracted with this worry and that concern and this thing that happened and this drama and blah blah blah. And like there's no presence. You're internally bound, and you're like a wall. But when you're calm and you're quiet and you meditate and you just sit and you surrender, those things start to settle. The waters of mind and emotion start to just level out, and suddenly you just kind of see things with this clarity, and you can be with people in a less reactive way. And so it's a really simple thing, but it's how to be, and people need space. So I think from there, I just wanted to emphasize and support more of what you just said at the end on presence. And it's what gives me the ability to work with the people that I work with and provide such fast access. I had a girl come in the other day to our call. I just brought her in. I had an hour call with her before, had to break it up a bit, but she was really like all up in here. And like, she was just saying over and over, like, wow, I feel like I'm in my heart. Like my heart's open. She's like, oh, I haven't felt this for a long time. She's like, oh, she's like, I just feel so good. I don't want it to leave. It's like, but why? Because I was just honoring everything she said, her struggles, because in her mind, she couldn't be with it by herself. And it just was bouncing back and forth, and then it would magnify. But I was like, well, just tell me about it. What's there? Okay. Like, can we welcome it? How do you feel in your body? Oh, just that. Okay. Got you. Like I'm here with that. Like, let's just have that together. I just support her in being with what's there. I model for her, and I tell her, I'm like, I'm modeling how I want you to be with yourself. And as she just started following me, she immediately started to feel more open, more expanded, less reactive, less volatile, less depressed, more in touch with herself and feeling love and her heart opening. And it was like, all I'm doing is emptying, using a little bit of words to guide that process and pull that through. But yeah, it's really key. So I'll just wrap up with a little prayer and just say, thank you, God, for giving us this message today for Brian and I first, because we do this for ourselves to grow in grace, in the knowing of the character of the living God, that we as men would walk in alignment with God's true purpose and power and have your presence. You are the space in which all things in the universe exist. And so Brian and I are here to be a space for other men and even women who watch and listen, to come to terms with the higher dimension, the higher possibility of being that's available. So it is our prayer. I know that men across the world would come into alignment with their divinity, that they would be better examples and leaders, that they would be less reactive, less volatile, or less avoidant, more willing to face life and bring love into life as masculine leadership, so that women can feel safe, that families can start to grow together again, that communities can be established, built, and strengthened by healthy masculine leadership, where women are fully honored and have that freedom to be their beautiful feminine selves. And the men are really holding that masculine strength part very securely in a stable way to protect the community and their family, but also creating opportunity for people everywhere. Like the good king is benevolent, right? They prosper their kingdom. And every man is called to be an expression of the divine king who seeks to prosper and bless the kingdom. Because when the people are blessed and prosperous, the kingdom is thriving and everybody's winning. And it's a possibility that we're here asking for, believing for, and looking for practically in ways to create it and establish it. So thank you, God, for filling us to overflowing with your love and your goodness. Amen.
Amen. All right, brother.
Love you, man. Great conversation. Thank you so much for this. Till next time. Peace.